Mark tore his eyes away from the laptop screen when he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. His wife, Karina, had just returned home and, as it turned out, was not alone. A woman's laughter rang out in the hallway, and soon two women appeared in front of him. Karina and her younger sister Anna, with a bright smile on their face and a suitcase in their hands, and NBSB. "Hey, Mark," Anna said cheerfully, hugging him on the doorstep. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, as if she had brought along not only a suitcase, but also an unpredictable whirlwind of adventure. "I hope you don't mind if I stay with you for a few days." Karina looked at her husband with a slight hint of reproach, as if she had anticipated his reaction to the sudden intrusion into their cozy world. He just nodded in agreement, suppressing a small wave of annoyance. The evening passed in a warm atmosphere, filled with conversations and laughter. Anna, as always, attracted attention with her bright appearance and confident behavior. She didn't look like her sister. There was a special magnetism about her that Mark couldn't help noticing. Her long blonde hair was loose around her shoulders, and there was something teasing in her eyes that made her heart beat a little faster than usual. That night, when everyone went to bed, Mark couldn't sleep. The thought of an attractive young woman in the next room haunted him, backslashed the image of Anna and her playful gaze, which seemed to promise more than just companionship, flashed through his mind like magical shadows. He tried to convince himself that it was just a fantasy caused by her sudden appearance in their lives, but deep down he knew that something unusual had already begun. After a few days, the tension between them became palpable. Anna was always there, as if by accident, talking to Mark and touching his arm or shoulder as if it were something completely innocent. He could smell her scent, feel her breath as she leaned toward him, and each time it became harder to contain the storm of emotions that rose in his chest. One evening, when Karina went to visit a friend, Mark was left at home alone with Anna. It was a warm evening, and they were sitting on the terrace, drinking wine and talking about life, when Anna suddenly reached out to him and whispered in his ear, "You know, Mark, I've always wondered how you handle being tempted like me." He froze, not knowing what to say, and felt her lips brush against his neck. The touch was both gentle and defiant, igniting a fire inside him that he couldn't resist. Something changed after that night. Mark tried to keep his composure, but every time he was alone with Anna, he felt the tension between them grow stronger. She became more daring in her gestures. Her touches seemed more intimate, and her gazes were full of hidden desire. Karina didn't seem to notice, completely trusting her sister and her husband, but this only added to the urgency of the situation. One day, when Karina was working late again, Mark came home to find Anna in the kitchen. She was wearing a short silk robe that barely covered her body shape. There was an open glass of wine on the table, and her lips were painted scarlet, which seemed to further enhance her attractiveness backslash. "Mark, I'm so glad you came," she said with a small smile, like a cat playing with its prey. "I was wondering if you and I could have a drink to pass the time until Karina gets back." He couldn't say no, even though he knew he was on the verge of death. They sat down at the table, and the conversation soon became more direct. Anna talked about her past relationships, shared secrets, and her voice was soft and enveloping. Mark felt himself drawn to her more and more by the minute, as if she were pulling him into the dark depths of the world. At one point, as Anna leaned closer to pour him more wine, her hand inadvertently brushed his thigh. The touch was light but hot, like a spark that instantly ignites a fire. She looked up at him, her hand still on his arm, and there was a hint of defiance in her eyes. "Anna," he whispered, unable to push her away or give in, but she had already taken a step toward him, leaning down to kiss him. Their kiss was slow and hungry, as if they'd been waiting for this moment all their lives. He could feel her warmth, the taste of wine on her lips, and all the inhibitions that had held him back for so long were shattered one by one. "This isn't right," he whispered, pulling his mouth away from hers. But she just ran her hand over his chest, as if telling him to forget about morality. "But it's beautiful, Mark," she said, her voice low and velvety, making him shiver. "Why don't we have a little fun? Karina will never know." He was about to say something when a key sounded in the door and Karina came in. Anna immediately pulled away, but her eyes were still burning with the same fire, and Mark knew that this evening was just the beginning of the season. Events unfolded quickly and unpredictably. After Karina entered the house, Mark and Anna quickly pretended that nothing had happened. Karina didn't seem to suspect anything out of the ordinary, smiling at both of them and telling them about her birthday. But Mark could feel the anxiety pulsing inside him, mixed with a desire that he could no longer ignore. The next day, Karina offered to arrange an evening for two, invite Anna, and spend time in the jacuzzi. It was a harmless idea, but it bothered him. On the one hand, he knew that intimacy with both women in a relaxing environment could lead to consequences. On the other hand, an inner voice whispered to him to give in to the temptation. They gathered in the evening. Mark sat in the hot water of the hot tub, watching as Karina and Anna slowly waded into the water. Both were wearing swimsuits that accentuated their figures. Karina sat down next to him and Anna opposite, while her foot lightly touched him under the water, and he felt his whole body tense from the unexpected touch of water. At one point, Karina raised a glass of champagne, smiling at her thoughts, and offered a toast. To us, to our true feelings and secret desires, she added, giving Mark a meaningful look. Mark felt a slight tremor in his body. The implication was so strong that for a moment he wondered if Karina might have been suspicious. But even as he considered her words, Anna leaned closer and under the water, her hand slid down his thigh. His breathing quickened, and he met her gaze with a silent question. "How far are we willing to go?" "I'm so tired after a long day," Anna said, wading out of the water and sitting on the edge of the hot tub so that her feet were submerged in the hot water. "Can you help me relax, Mark?" Karina looked at her sister and laughed. "Maybe Mark could really do it," she said, her voice tinged with a hint, and he didn't know if she was joking or if her suggestion was serious. The water around them seemed even hotter than before. He ran his hand slowly down her leg, feeling the smoothness of her skin, and leaned in closer. Karina didn't look away, watching them with an interest he couldn't quite understand. Anna slid into the water and found herself in front of Mark, her lips moving closer to his until they touched in a kiss, this time more passionate than before. He expected Karina to object, to stop them, but instead he felt her hands on his back. She was touching him, stroking him, pushing him toward Anna, and this unexpected attraction brought new sensations to him. Mark was caught between two fires, Karina's hands caressing him, and Anna's lips digging deeper into his own. Seconds merged into minutes, their bodies intertwined under the water, until they were drowned in this forbidden whirlwind of passion between the three of them. The next few days passed in a blur. Mark couldn't shake the memory of that night, when he'd been caught between two women who'd turned his head and led him over the dangerous edge of hell. Karina and Anna acted as if everything was natural to them, but he could feel the struggle between guilt and the desire to survive tearing at his soul. In the evening, when Karina left for a meeting with her friends, Anna was left alone with Mark again. Her intentions were obvious as soon as she entered the room wearing a short silk robe that exposed her slender legs. Her eyes were burning with the same fire that Mark had seen in them before, and she moved so close to him that he could feel her hot breath on his skin. "You know what happened then," she whispered, touching his lips with her index finger. "It was not accidental, and I think we would both like to repeat it." He didn't know what to say. His thoughts were all muddled, but as her hand slid over his body, the doubts began to fade. He wrapped his arms around her, and their lips met again in a hungry kiss. It was like an avalanche that carries everything in its path, his mind, his feelings, his will. Anna took his hand and led him to the bedroom, where the two of them merged in passion, as if the whole world ceased to exist outside of this room. He could feel her breath on his neck, her whisper, the words that ignited a fire in his blood. Her body, smooth and supple, responded to his touch, and she responded with the same fervor and unbridled desire for him. But suddenly, just as they were at the climax of their relationship, the bedroom door opened and Karina was standing in the doorway. She stared at them, her eyes a mixture of pain and anger. Her voice was cold, but there was a hint of bitterness in it. "So you decided to continue without me." Anna pulled away from Mark, but there was no regret in her eyes, more of a challenge. "Maybe that's what we all need," she whispered, walking over to Karina and putting her hand on her shoulder. "We could try again, the three of us." Karina hesitated for only a moment, and Mark saw her lips twitch as if she wanted to say something. But the next moment, she reached out and kissed him as if she was trying to drown all her doubts in that kiss. Mark was between them, and this time there was no guilt, no fear. Only the passion and unbreakable bond that bound the three of them in a tight knot, full of forbidden pleasures and bold discoveries. After that threesome night, the relationship between Mark, Karina, and Anna became even more complicated and unpredictable. There was a tense atmosphere in their home, full of innuendos and innuendos. Whenever they were alone together, Mark felt an invisible thread pull him from one woman to the other, but now it was hard to know who was playing the leading role in this dangerous game. Anna grew bolder and bolder, as if she wasn't worried about her sister's possible jealousy. She could openly flirt with Mark even in front of Karina, throwing provocative glances and casually touching his arm or shoulder. Mark could feel the touch of it igniting a fire inside him, and despite his conscience, he couldn't resist the temptation to leave. Karina, on the other hand, seemed more reserved. Her feelings for Mark grew increasingly complex, from raw passion to morbid jealousy, especially when she caught him giving her ambiguous glances with Anna. One day, when Anna left the house, Karina came up to Mark and, looking straight into his eyes, said, "I need to understand what you really want, Marcus. You know how I feel. The way you and Anna look at each other. Do you love her?" Mark was taken aback by her bluntness and didn't know what to say. He knew that this was the moment of truth, and that many things depended on it. But his mind was swirling with thoughts, and in the end he said what he really felt. "I can't give you a definitive answer, Karina. What happened wasn't just an accident, but I still love you. I'm confused." Karina nodded slowly, a hint of sadness flickering in her eyes. "If that's the case," she said, "then you must make a choice. We can't go on like this forever." But just then the door opened, and Anna came in. Her eyes instantly caught the tension in the air, and as if she could read it all in her sister's and Mark's faces, she chuckled. "Oh, I see a serious conversation is brewing here. Don't worry. I was just about to go out," she said, but there was a hint of irony in her voice. But instead of leaving, she walked over to Mark, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "If you do choose me, I'll make you the happiest man alive." The words came out as a challenge and a promise at the same time, fueling an overwhelming urge to fight. Anna ran her hand over his chest, and then, as if nothing had happened, she turned to Karina and gave her a meaningful look before walking away, leaving them alone together. Karina, furious and offended, could not stand it. "Are you really going to go after her, Mark? Or do you want to stay with me and fight for us?" Mark realized that the moment of choice had arrived. He stood at a crossroads, torn between passion and duty, and knew that whatever path he chose, it would change their lives forever. Mark stood in complete silence, feeling the tension in the room thicken like a thick fog. Karina stared at him, waiting for an answer, and despair flared up in his soul, mixed with the painful realization that there was no way to avoid the pain. No matter what he decides, someone is bound to be deceived and injured. "Karina," he began, taking a step toward her, "I do not know how it happened. It all started out as a game, but I lost control. I know I deserve your wrath, but I still love you." There was something like hope in her eyes, but there was also a bitterness that couldn't be hidden. She took a step back, as if trying to keep some distance between them. "Do you like it?" She sounded incredulous. "If that were true, you wouldn't have let Anna drag you into this game. Do you think I didn't notice anything? She was always unpredictable and cunning. But I didn't expect you to be so weak as well." Her words hit Mark hard. He could feel anger building in his chest, mixing with guilt. But before he could reply, the door opened again, and Anna appeared in the doorway. There was just the faintest hint of a grin on her face, and she stepped forward as if to take her place in the conflict. "I knew you wouldn't be able to figure it out without me," she said, her voice mocking, but there was something more in her eyes, uncertainty disguised as defiance. "Why don't we all discuss this together? After all, this is exactly how it all started." Karina broke down and flared up like a match. "Anna, that's enough. Do you really think you can just ruin our relationship? I know you've always been jealous of me, always wanted to prove yourself better than me, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy my family." Anna took another step toward Mark, as if challenging her sister. "And if I didn't destroy it, but only helped you see the truth?" Her words sounded like a provocation. "Maybe it's not my fault that Mark ended up in my arms, but because you're no longer the woman he once fell in love with." Mark sensed a tense struggle between the two women, in which he himself was no more than a prize. He didn't want this to continue, but before he could say anything, Karina turned to him sharply. "You have to choose, Mark, right now," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Either you follow her or you stay with me. There is no third option." He looked at Anna, who was standing in front of him, beautiful and attractive, but there was a hint of insincerity in her eyes. Then he turned to Karina, whose eyes were filled with pain, but also with sincerity and love, even if she was wounded. Mark took a step toward Karina and put his arm around her, whispering, "I choose you. I'm sorry for everything." Karina clung to him, even as tears rolled down her cheeks. Anna stood off to the side, watching, her lips pressed together. Her eyes burned with frustration and anger. She spun around and left the room, slamming the door behind her. But even though Mark had made a choice, he knew that his relationship with Karina had reached a new stage of development. It was impossible to enter the same river twice, so this was just the beginning of a long road to healing. And no one knew if they would be able to complete it together.